Hi everyone, it's Baker from Man vs. Debt, and today I wanted to record a quick video using a sample flight itinerary to show you the basic process that we use when finding airfare online. So, the place most people start is by going to the big aggregator sites. That's not always the best route to go. It's a good place to start. But there are a lot of budget airlines that aren't included in those aggregators, so it's always good to check. So I've recently been turned on to a site called Trapedo. Trapedo is an aggregator of all the aggregators, as if you can believe that or not. So as we wait for Trapedo to load, here you enter in your details, and what we're going to do is we're going to use an example that we want to fly from Christchurch, New Zealand to Bangkok, Thailand. How would we go about doing that? So this is just the scratch process that we would use. So we type in Christchurch, which you can look up the airport code or just type in Christchurch, to Bangkok, and it should pop in the to box there. And let's say we wanted to leave on sometime or on or around December 30th. Here you can select the travel sites. You could, of course, go to these different sites, the popular ones like Expedia and Priceline and Orbitz on your own. Most of these I don't really like. Priceline is usually pretty horrible. STA Travel can be pretty good. So I'm going to click these 5. You could click all or 1 or 2 and hit go, and it should pop up a whole bunch of different windows here, and it'll take a second for it to load. Also, when I'm doing research, I just have a basic text document that I keep open in order to aggregate information. Alright, next big thing when you're doing international trips is to make sure you have the currency. All these should be in USD, and I've done this search before, so I know. But you always want to check, because if you're in a foreign country, sometimes you load up an aggregate site and it actually loads up in the foreign currency, and sometimes it'll load up in USD. For example, Orbitz.com, of course, is going to be a United States address, but there are different aggregates, and some will be .co.nz and might be in New Zealand dollars. So these are all in US. So right away we can see 1021. So low 1000s, we have some options. Again, the particulars don't matter. Low 1000s, low 1000, 1010, 1129, and 1011. So pretty consistent. So what I'll do is I'll just provide a baseline. So I could put like aggregates equals 1010 per ticket. Now, this does have the traditional fees in it, but it doesn't have all the fees, because there are sometimes booking fees. When you're traveling for an infant, there can be fees that will come up for having the infant that aren't in this ticket. But so this again is a base price. The actual booking is going to be more than just 2 times that price. Alright, so once we have this base price, we're going to come down here, and the next step we usually do, the most popular site that I've heard of and what I like to do is called Which Budget. Obviously right there. Which Budget does a fairly good job. You can also do a Google search of the different flight paths. So you would search Christchurch to, even just type in budget airline Christchurch to Bangkok. But this is a fairly good site to do that, and you have to type out it in this Christchurch, Bangkok, and we want to try all airports. Go, and by doing this, we see that it immediately comes up and says Jetstar, which Courtney and I have flown before. It's not the bottom end of the budget airlines. It's not the ones where you hold on to your seat and you're afraid for your life. It's a fairly good airline, actually, and we've had a really positive experience getting low fares and having pretty good service. And I know that Jetstar, for example, doesn't pop up in the searches, but you could go back here and check. So we got Qantas, British Airways. You know, you can go down here really quick. Qantas, British Airways, Air New Zealand, Air China. Qantas, British Airways, Air New Zealand, Air China. So these are all aggregating from the same flights, not including Jetstar. So the next step after I find out this, I might Google and try to find some more, but to save some time, I'm just going to show you Jetstar's site. First of all, the direct sites sometimes have special deals. Like down here, you have domestic and international flights. So from Auckland to Christchurch, you have a $59 Jet Saver Lite deal, which is not really that big of a deal. But you can find sometimes you can find deals. Southwest recently had a what they called a fourth quarter sale, and it had some really good um, United States domestic flights that were on the site, but that wouldn't have popped up in the aggregators either. So I always go to the site of the airline to double check. And with Jetstar, you can enter in your information over here, but um, look for these type of things too. And this is just something that I know from being here before. Oh, and notice that this is actually in New Zealand, so it's not in USD. So we'll get into that in a second. But using this button that says Find Our Lowest Fares, this is really good for booking a flexible flight. So I'll show you how this works. The first thing I would do is I'd come here and just try to get all the way there. So Christchurch to Bangkok. This is not really necessary either, but let's just put in 2 adults and 1 infant if it was us, and we said around December 30th. Now this says sorry, there are no flights available, but I'm pretty sure that's not true from looking it up. There are several reasons it can do this. Usually on the Which Budget site, which I don't have up anymore, it listed a couple different affiliates, and as it turns out, part of the leg of this trip is through Jetstar Asia, and so it doesn't actually go on here. The lesson from here is that this says there are no flights available, but there's actually are flights available. So don't always just take this and go, okay, Jetstar's not an option. What we need to do next is, if there's no direct flights, we need to find out what the major hub cities will be when you're dealing with international flights. This actually happens in the United States domestically too. But you can do that by going here and scrolling down and seeing where flights go. Christchurch to Sydney, Sydney to Bangkok. That's going to be a common one. Sydney. So I can already tell that Sydney, it makes sense due to the actual flight path, but Sydney is a popular, these are all Qantas. Sydney is a popular hub. When you get down here to some of the other ones, these are all Sydney. I will save a little bit of time, but some of them go to Melbourne as well as you start to get down here. And the other major one is Hong Kong. So knowing that, I'll go back to Jetstar, and I'll go back. I'm going to open up a couple more windows of this. Bam. Okay, so let's say Christchurch to, we'll start with Sydney because that seemed to be the most popular. Again, December 30th stayed in there for me, so we'll have a go. And now this brings up a calendar effect. Some sites offer this and other sites don't, but this I find really beneficial for us because we can be flexible. Being flexible with when we fly is one of the main areas that we save money in. So, as you can see, stopping in Sydney, what I'll do is I'll just kind of evaluate. Our time frame, if this was going to be a realistic trip for us, our time frame, we wouldn't be able to go as early as the 26th of December, which is when it kind of, the 25th has 163 compared to 533 on the 30th. You can see there's not much time difference there. As it drops down, the first, that could be a little bit more reasonable, and just by going on the first opposed to the 30th, we save 200 bucks. I mean, 200 bucks can buy your hotel if you just wanted to stay over a couple extra days and sightsee. So, and then I'll kind of browse, and there's not very many other killer deals. It kind of, you get a little bit lower on the 7th here. So what I'm going to note on my spreadsheet here is, I'm actually going to keep this up, but I'll kind of just note Christchurch to Sydney. I don't know what Sydney's code is. And I'm going to write on the 30th, it equals 533.35. And the next, so that's kind of like an expensive mark that I want to kind of know. And then the first is a pretty good deal at 323. Okay, and so the other part of this is obviously if I'm going to do that, I need to know what Sydney to Bangkok is. One note is searching like this when you have multiple windows open actually messes it up. This will keep this up for review, but when you go through it, it plays some tricks with it. So anyway, this again is in Australian dollars because I'm originating from Sydney in this case. So that's going to be important later on, and it's important to watch currencies when you're booking like this. But I can see right now that the 30th is not available when we want to travel on this particular budget airline. 930 is a lot of money for that leg of the flight, even in Australian. But I can see here 713 it starts to sink, and January 7th, the 12th, but January 7th and even the 5th we've got some lower prices there as well. So I can already tell that if I'm going in Australia for 553 and the first leg of the flight, it's not going to be a knockout deal, but I'm going to record this anyway. So Sydney to Bangkok, and I'm just going to record the 7th right now, just as a gauge. It's sort of a low but realistic time to fly for our particular example that we're using. All right. So now what I would do is I would run through the other options real quick. Christchurch to Melbourne. I'm going to skip Hong Kong. I did Hong Kong, and it doesn't come out to be even as good as Sydney, so I'm just going to skip that. You'll just have to trust me for time's sake. But let's try Christchurch to Melbourne. Whenever you have a chance, always search all airports. You can always choose the more expensive one if you want to be convenient. We'll go here. And this MEL tells us that we're flying into the MEL Melbourne code that uses MEL, the airport. So here we go. The 30th is 276, but on the 31st we have 206, and that's actually the cheapest except the 17th, which isn't realistic. So this is actually pops out to me, 206 compared to Sydney. Look, 533 and 323. So right away, this really pops out to me. Melbourne looks like a great option on the 31st for 206 New Zealand. But, of course, the flip side of that is always Melbourne. Melbourne, MEL. So we don't really need to search all because we're flying in that airport, but we'll do it just in case. We'll take a transportation across town if it saves that a lot of money. And once again, Bangkok was already in there and I messed it up. Where is it? Oh, okay. Bangkok on December 30th. And here we have 694 on the day that we'd want to fly if they had a flight later in the day, which is more than the city to Bangkok. But what I do notice is as we go along here, on the 7th it drops to 474 compared to that 553. So there is a better deal there. And actually, yesterday this was lower than that. This was, I think, in the low 400s, 424, 444. Anyway, now it's 474. So we're going to, I'll mark here that this is an Australian again. But I'll mark here that Melbourne to BKK on the 7th is actually 474. And I might actually note that the 31st is 694. Just for a mental note. So, again, I tried Hong Kong. Hong Kong didn't come out very well. But right now, just judging by these two numbers, this Melbourne connection looks fairly decent here. Sydney, it's better than Sydney in both cases. So I'm just going to mark out Sydney. This is probably the process I would use. I might keep that information, copy and paste it someplace else, but I'm going to look more into this Melbourne option. So what I need to do that is I need to open up two windows and make sure I get the current exchange rates. So I need New Zealand to USD equals 71.77 US dollars. So I'm going to whip out my handy calculator, and this Melbourne flight at 206, and this is base, this is before fees, so we'll get to that in a second, but 206 times 0.71, just for an example, is we're roughly playing in the ballpark of 146. This is actually going to bump up to more like 300 after fees, but again, we're just going to get a ballpark to see what we're doing here. So this is 474, and this is actually Australian dollars to US dollars, so 90 or 91. So let's do the 474. So that's roughly 430 US dollars per ticket. Okay, so at an eyeball glance, before fees, we have 576 bucks US. That's already starting to look much better than our options on the aggregates. Even if you ran the numbers on this 694, which is 200 bucks or so more, that's still 770, which you're still 770 USD, which is still puts you in a much better range, even if you flew on the exact same day as we were looking for in these. Actually, it's the 31st to the 30th, but when you change this to the 31st, these aggregators don't change the price at all. So the point being that we have the chance to find some much better deals. Now, the next step would be to go and to check, to go through the process, see what the fees add up to, and like adding in an infant for us and doing all that. I can tell you that I did the math, and I actually took the next step and called the travel agent, called the airline direct to make sure and book it all in one currency and set that up. And then what the numbers came out to be was the quote was $1,501 USD after we completely transferred it for the 2 legs of the flight, which included a stayover in Melbourne, and infant charge and exchange fees and putting it on the debit card and everything. So that if we wanted to do something like this, it would be 1501 US. And I didn't go all the way through the process with these, but I can tell you from experience that this is going to be, well, at least $2,022. There is going to be an infant fee, at least for part of this flight. It can be anywhere from a flat fee of 20 or 30 bucks to 10% of the ticket is usually somewhere where infants can fall in. Some of the legs they're free, but not to Asia, not in my experience. So even if we give this the benefit of the doubt and we say there's not going to be any charge for using a debit card or a credit card, there's not going to be any charge for carrying an infant, which I know there are going to be, and there are not going to be any booking fees, that comes out to be 2022 just eyeballing it and looking at it. So the point of all this is not to give you step-by-step directions on how to find the best deal on your flight, but just to point out a real-life example of why, if you only use aggregators like this, you can be missing out on a lot. In our sample case, this is at least $500 USD. Long story short, make sure you look into all the options. Consider budget airlines. Don't take the aggregators as always finding the best deals. Sometimes they do have good deals, but oftentimes you'll have more luck looking up budget airlines and also looking for deals on major carriers. One last thing that I wanted to point out is by talking to local people in the different countries or the different areas, or even just online, tapping your social markets, you can find sites like Grab a Seat. We would have no idea about this unless we had been referred to it several times by people in New Zealand. And what this is it's a domestic New Zealand website run through Air New Zealand. And in October they gave away 100 seats every day for $1, and they have different type of flights that pop up. And it was supposed to end in October, but they've recently decided to do it again in November. So what happens on each day at a different point in time, these deals pop up, and you get Auckland to Wellington, Wellington to Auckland, Christchurch to Nelson, Nelson to Christchurch, all these different deals for all these different times. Some are in the spring, but some are like December 21st to January 10th. This isn't a dollar one, but at $49 is a fairly good price for a domestic flight as well. So these change, these dates change. So if we wanted to do a domestic travel at any point, this is a great site to watch every day. You can sign up for updates. Courtney has set this to her homepage, so every time she pops up on her laptop, she sees this just in case one of these are available. And it's just another country-specific or unique site that we were turned on to just by tapping our social network here in New Zealand. Everyone knows about it in New Zealand. So just another example of thinking outside the aggregator box. So I hope you enjoyed the video or found some value in it. If you have any questions, you can email me at baker@manversusdebt.com and read the post on the blog for other travel hacking tips for noobs. So thanks and have a great day.